Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 965. My opponent started off here with e4, and I went with knight f6, the Alekhine's defense. So he goes e5, the main move. I go knight d5, also the main move, and then he continues with d4. You can play c4 immediately. It often transposes, but d4 is a little bit more flexible. He might go for the modern variation with knight f3 later, or the four pawns attack with f4. Let's see, I played d6. That's the main response. You want to start putting pressure on the center right away. And then he goes with c4. Like I said, the modern line against the Alekhine's defense is knight f3 there. But this is good. Actually, I play this way myself with c4. It gives you a little more space as white. Kick the knight back. And then here you can go with the four pawns attack with f4. Or you can just take, which is the way I usually play, and then black has a choice of taking back with either pawn. But, well, here he played the move knight f3, so this is a bit surprising to me. Although you can see, we actually are just kind of transposing into that modern line. So it's sort of like he had played the move knight f3 a bit earlier and then followed up with c4. But in this move order, I can play bishop to g4. I think that's a good move to get my bishop outside the pawn chain. I don't have to go with knight c6 right away. And maybe knight c6 is a slight mistake, at least opening database here seems to question it. So anyway, bishop g4 is a good move. And then he played the bishop e2, and now we are in kind of a rare section of the database, and black really is doing just fine here. He probably should go ahead and take. He's avoiding taking for some reason, although this had the effect of getting me out of my book, so I didn't know, the exact right moves here, and I had to kind of find them on my own. And here I played the move e6, which transposes into known lines. So you can see there's 34 games in the database in that position after e6. So it's not a terrible move, but in fact, this is a position where I can just take the pawn. And so this sort of shows a little bit of my lack of familiarity. The Alekhine's defense is a fairly recent addition to my repertoire, so I don't have the same familiarity with it as I do with other defenses like the Nimzo or the Sicilian, or even the e4, e5 lines. But you should always, if you're playing this line, you should always be looking at the tension, and particularly when white has refused to capture here, oftentimes this capture is really good. So I didn't see it, but I looked at a couple of different lines here. So the first thing is, as in the database, also the chess engine was suggesting, he could capture that pawn with a knight. Then you trade bishops, get rid of that bishop, and you win a pawn. Or, if he wants to avoid losing the pawn, he can always take with the king, but you get some kind of advantage out of that. So taking that leads to an advantage. There's another try here. You take the pawn. He could take back with his pawn. Trade queens. Once again, I suppose he could take with the king, but taking with the bishop is most natural. And then you get this pawn. So either he loses a pawn, or he has to move his king and lose castling privileges. So in this position, it's just a good move to take on e5, and I missed that opportunity. Now, like I said, there's nothing wrong with e6. My opening has not gone wrong yet. And in fact, after h3 and bishop takes, it seems like I'm still doing fine here. d5, though, it seems to be, is the kind of a decisive opening mistake and white has an edge for a while after that. I do get back in the game after this, so it's not like game over at this point, but I'm giving him an easy time by playing d5, giving him a clear plan. So what are the moves here? Well, first of all, I was concerned about bishop takes b7, a pretty annoying move, and it hits the rook in the corner, which has no squares at the moment. So c6 is a logical response there, and keeping the center fluid seems to be the way to play this. This knight can come out to d7 and put more pressure on the e5 pawn, and this bishop is ready to recapture on d6. So c6 is a fine move. Another interesting way to play is to actually sacrifice a pawn, at least temporarily, because if he takes this pawn, well, first that knight moves. I mean, it's a developing move, but it also gives a square for the rook. So now the rook doesn't get lost in the corner. The bishop drops back, and now this tension in the center has paid off, and you're actually going to win this pawn. So this is also a fine way for black to play. So black is okay in either of those lines. White is probably slightly better. White still has advantages in these positions of space and easy development, but certainly playable in somewhat typical positions for the Alekhine's defense. But d5 just lets him shut things down here. The chess engine says he could either take or push. It likes both those moves, but it thinks white has a pretty big edge after this. He's kicking my knight around. This was an interesting play, but he just lets him chase my knight around some more. He castles, play b6 to try and undermine the center. He goes bishop d2. Some of these moves weren't the most precise from white, but they were all reasonable. But it seems like knight a to c6 would allow me to get back in the game, and this would be a position that's okay. I was reluctant to play it because it seems like my knight is in the way of the other knight. Let's see, a takes b6 is the recommended move there. Yeah, opening up the a file. Makes some sense, and maybe this knight can come back here at some point and put some pressure on the a pawn. And then bishop to e3. I'm also starting to put pressure on this pawn. So I guess that's the point of bringing the knight back, is it does put pressure on the center. So anyway, this would be a playable line. Instead I went pawn to c6, so black is, or white is keeping the advantage here. Let's see, he went ahead and took my knight. I went with, and then he went knight c3. Went bishop e7, so just getting my pieces out. But you can see now that black has got a pretty solid pawn structure here wrapped around my pawns. And I'm going to try and undermine it with the f-pawn, of course, but it'll take me a while to organize this. And in the meantime, white enjoys a space advantage there. So this is a good position for white. Let's see, played queen d3. I went knight d7. I went queen to a6. This maneuver probably wasn't the best. I think the queen ends up retreating. But anyway, I do have to hold on to my pawns over here on the queen side. So he went bishop g4 now. I just castled. The action in this position, though, I think is going to be on the king side. Let's see. He did eventually bring his queen back. So I played my rook to e8. Yeah, the f rook. I was starting to get concerned about the state of this e pawn. I want to push the f pawn forward, but the bishop here is keeping pressure on the e pawn. So that's the point of this rook f e8 move. Let's see. He went f4, and now I went knight f8. So yeah, I still can't move my f pawn forward. And here he went f5. So that apparently is a slight mistake, and lets me equalize with the good play. So instead of that, rook a to d1 is recommended. And then after I play something like rook a d8, just g3. So the chess engine is not in any hurry with white to push pawns forward and open up lines. It's just kind of gradually improving the position, making things a little bit stronger here and there, and waiting for an opportunity to break through. It's a little bit tricky to play that way sometimes, because you are giving up the initiative and giving it over to your opponent, and maybe he can find something. It seems white has a pretty good clamp on the position, so it's hard for me to break out. Anyway, he went f5, and the move that would equalize for me here is f6. Although this is a computer variation, I don't think a person would actually find this, or they might play this just on principle to try and open things up. But if you look at this line, it doesn't look all that appealing. So let's see. White starts with f takes e6, so gets a pawn here. Black plays f takes e5. White penetrates with the rook to f7. That's why I say this doesn't look that appealing. But black does get e4 in. And apparently this position is about balanced. Well, I'm gaining a tempo on the queen, but the queen is going to come over and harass my king side some more. But my knight has some squares to come out and defend, and my bishop can defend, and this knight will take a while to get over with because of my pawns blocking up the center. So anyway, my bishop, of course, is pinned against the queen, but I guess the queen can move. Tricky position. That would be very difficult to play, I have to say, for black. So I just took here. He's got this advanced pawn that he can push to open up lines against my king. But I was thinking this isn't too bad. And, well, once again, f6 is preferred here. This makes more sense. I actually thought about f6 here, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to live with this e6, this pawn on e6. I think we may be getting into a position like that later. But anyway, I played knight g6 here instead, and I tried to arrange this f6 move in a little better fashion. So he went ahead and traded immediately and played rook to f3. And now I went g5. So this position is still in the balance, but g5 is setting me on a downhill path once again. And it's kind of a natural move. I wanted to push the f-pawn forward, but I didn't want to just surrender the g-pawn, so I pushed it forward so I wouldn't lose it. So how the chess engine would play is like this. Rook to f8. Say he brings his rook over to e1. I think this is pretty natural to prepare to push that pawn and break through. Queen to d7, holding it back for a moment. Knight to d1, so preparing to bring the knight around to the king side. And then f6. So momentarily leaving this pawn hanging. We'll come back to that. The line the chess engine gives is e6, pushing that pawn forward. And the queen goes over to e8 and defends the pawn. And just kind of holds on to things here on the king side. And it seems like this is okay. Now let's come back to that point where he played e6. I mean, I was avoiding this kind of line because I didn't like queen takes g6. But in this case, once again, I get to take here if he grabs that pawn. And then he can throw on this exchange of rooks. It doesn't much matter. Oops. I need to take with the rook here, sorry. Well, I don't have to, but it's best. And then after that, his center is under fire, and he takes here, and I take here with check is the line that's given by the chess engine. I guess the chess engine wants to go for this pawn push here, which looks very dangerous, but I do get a tempo on the king, and apparently this is another position where the game is still in the balance, whereas after g5, it looks like I'm in pretty bad shape here. So anyway, interesting stuff going on here, but hard to see. Anyway, he played rook a to f1, pretty natural move, doubling on the f-file, and I pushed on with f6 here. That was my plan, and he does get in the c6 move. So it seems like I'm just going to have to live with this, and I do eventually maneuver my pieces over to defend my king side, in a way that was similar to that last line that we saw, but it's a little bit slower. So the chess engine gets to this kind of position without wasting a tempo on g5 and gets the pieces over to defend a little quicker. So that's the better way to play. Anyway, let's see, I played queen c8 here. I'm taking a look at this pawn and also thinking about how to bring my queen over to the king side to defend some squares over here. He plays queen f5, which defends the pawn. Went rook f8. He goes knight e2, brings his knight over. I go queen e8. He goes knight g3. It seems like knight g3 was not the most accurate, but he should play with h4. And then, let's see, I can kick his queen back, but the queen can come around to this h3 square, and this is very good for white. So this is the way that white breaks through. So knight g3, although it looks like, let's back up. Knight g3, although it looks like a very natural move to me, bringing more force into the attack is apparently not the most accurate. And yeah, the way to play it is to throw in that h4 move. And part of the point is that it gives a queen that square on h3 to run to. So anyway, after knight to h3, I get in the move g6, and that's why his knight to g3 was just a little too slow. So now his queen has to drop back, and it can't find a home on the h-file. It's got to drop back towards the center. So I lift my king up here to support these pawns. He starts routing his knight around again with knight h1, and I went rook h8. I needed to continue here. I'd kind of gotten back in the game at this point, and I needed to continue with f5. Let's see, he could bring his knight around like this, knight f2. I get my bishop to a better square, start to take a look at this center pawn again. Let's see, plays rook e1, getting the rook behind the e-pawn, and I can go queen e7, blockading. And it seems like this is a position maybe I can hold. I was a little too eager. I saw this open h-file or half-open h-file, and I just wanted to get something going, some counterplay going. So with the rook here and the pawn coming forward, I thought maybe I could make something happen, but it's just not working. So anyway, rook h8, not the best move here. He brings his knight around. Play queen to g8 now. I'm just doing a little bit of maneuvering. I was thinking maybe the queen would come here, although I changed my mind because I couldn't see any follow-up there. And so anyway, this is just, it did come with tempo because it puts pressure on the e-pawn. He defends it, but I couldn't find anything here, and I end up just moving my queen back. So it's a wasted tempo of mine. The rook that he got this move in rook to e3 for free is another way to think about it. And that's a decent square for his rook. So I wasted a bit of time there. He opts in with knight g4. Let's see, I played rook back to f8. So we can see that rook h8 maneuver did not pay off. He brings his rook back to the f-file. So he decided he wanted to just pile up here. And I pushed on with f5. So this is good timing. This is a reasonable time to play this move. Plays knight e5. And now I go queen c7 here. And this loses very quickly, and we will show this in the game. But I just wanted to show that I was actually in trouble already at this point. I could have played rook f6, so this is best play according to the chess engine, and try and round up a pawn and give up this move. I just wanted to mention, one of the reasons why knight e5 was a stronger move than I had realized was that it's the knight and the queen are coordinating on my g6 square. So, I might have had the idea of pushing the f-pawn forward at some point, and now that's just out of the picture. And even pushing the e-pawn forward after the trade, if I take back, it opens up that diagonal. So knight e5, good move here. So we were looking at my best reply, which would have been rook f6, defending and maybe enabling the possibility of pushing the f-pawn forward. But it gives up the c-pawn. That was the other thing about the knight move. The knight was also attacking the c-pawn as well as bringing threats on this side. And but I can get a pawn back here is the point. I play queen e8. He takes. I take rook e1. I can grab the e-pawn now. He takes. I take. But after all of this, he can play rook e3. The material is actually even 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 versus 6, but my pawn structure is a mess, and he gets to control the e-file. So this is one of those funny positions where even though the material is even, the chess engine is already giving a +3 or +4 advantage to white. And I don't know what I'm going to do about that rook invasion at this point, winning a queen for a rook. So maybe that's where the material advantage comes in. But that was best play from black. So you can see my position already is in big trouble. Anyway, I noticed he was attacking this pawn, and he can't immediately break through over here, so I defended. But g4 is a very strong move here, and just weakening me on the light squares here. I tried bishop f6 just to trade off that pesky knight. I took on e5, he took back, and I managed to get rid of the knight, but at the price of giving him these monster pawns, and I really can't do anything about them coming forward And so this is a straightforward win from this point, just pushing the pawns forward. Oh, that's right, he pushed forward with the e-pawn, kicking my rook. I try to blockade, but rook to e3 chases my queen, and he's going to promote. Let's see, I stepped aside, he queens, so now I'm down a rook. I played on for a few tricks. Let's see, I played queen d7, he went queen to e3 here, I went queen to f5. Yeah, that was just a mistake. I'd been wanting to play that, I'd been wanting to get my queen out here on one of these squares supported by the pawn, but his rook was always controlling it. So at this point, I gave up after he took my queen. I could have given up a couple of moves earlier, but that's it for sure. Anyway, it was an interesting game. I thought pretty well played by white. He let me have a few chances, but I didn't manage to exploit them. And anyway, I wanted to look at that opening in the Alekhine's defense. That's, if I want to emphasize something about this game, it's that even if you're away from some of the standard positions, there's still ideas and themes that are, characteristic of the opening. And one of them is, this central tension. You always want to try with the Alekhine's defense to try and undermine the center. And here he was giving me an opportunity to exploit the undermining of the center, and I didn't take advantage of that. So even though we've wandered away from the main lines of opening theory, there's still these thematic ideas of attacking the center with the Alekhine's defense I should have been a little more aware of. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you again soon. Bye.